Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to everybody listening in to the Row Perfect Rowing Chat podcast. My name's Rebecca Caro. I'm delighted to be with you again. Rowing Chat, this is a podcast with and for people who enjoy the sport of rowing. Today, I'm joined by Jim Dietz. He's head coach at the University of Massachusetts women's crew. Good day, Jim.
Good
Tell the
afternoon.
listeners a little bit about yourself.
Presently, I'm the coach of the University of Massachusetts women's team. I started rowing some 53 years ago as a high school student back in the Bronx, New York. A little unusual to have a rowing program back then in the Bronx, but it was something that was affiliated with the New York Athletic Club, which became my club. So I started off in sweet boats as a high schooler, but as people stopped showing up, I moved into the single. By the time I graduated high school, I had won the first World Juniors Single Sculling Championship in Ratzeburg, Germany. Went on to represent the United States in about 7 or 8 world teams and 3 Olympic teams. As an athlete, moved into coaching in my later years. Started off coaching at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. And then for 9 years I was there. Then I moved up here to UMass for the last 21 years. I've always been involved in the sport on various levels. At this particular time, I'm vice president of U.S. Rowing, trying to help the tremendous growth that we're having in our sport in the United States.
Well, congratulations, and I'm really delighted to hear that rowing's so vibrant in such a large country. Now, let's get into the lovely questions that have been sent in by our listeners. And the first one we're going to kick off with is from Jonathan, who's in Longmeadow and a member of the Pioneer Valley Riverfront Club. Jonathan asks, as a repetitive motion discipline, what methods do you find most effective to avoid injury?
I think the first thing here, Rebecca or Jonathan, is the focus on your core development, working, all of the intercostals, abdominals around on an athlete. But I think it can be even a little bit broader and looking at the total development of the athlete. A lot of rowing and a lot of rowing coaches look at the sport of rowing as just sitting in a boat and working as hard as you can. The total development of the athlete, I think, is really important to minimize injury. Teaching an athlete to run properly, to jump properly, to throw properly, these are all things that help create a better athlete and a better rower. We do a tremendous amount of work with flyout circuits using medicine balls, box jumps, running stairs. A variety of different disciplines in order to make a good athlete. The focus on posture, I think, is the key thing in rowing. To avoid all of those intercostal pulls and bad backs, the focus on your posture, the way you sit in the boat, is the most important thing. As I travel around the country, going into different programs, it's almost as bad as going into the local YMCA and seeing people sit on the erg, as poorly as people are presenting themselves on the machine. I think the coach and the athlete really has to be aware of how they look while you're on an erg or in the boat through rowing video or mirrors, to see how you're sitting and how your body is structured to withstand the forces that you're going to be put on it. The fact that it is so repetitive is a good thing in that if you are training yourself properly, if your coaches are training you, to look the right way, to have the right posture, you're going to minimize those injuries that are going to set you back.
So going to teach beginners, how can a coach make the beginner aware of their body and what it looks like?
I think the first thing that a coach has to do is have a dialogue with the athlete as to, what is this all about? What are the strongest part of your body? What do you want to emphasize in your rowing stroke? The rowing stroke can either be simultaneous or it can be sequential. I feel by being sequential, you're gonna be able to maximize more power, generate more energy, more velocity, and move the person along. So how to do that is a discussion I want to have with all of the athletes to educate them in what I want them to feel, where I want them to accelerate, how I want them to look and the reason for that, and simply gripping, the handle the wrong way, tendonitis in the wrist, having a slumped core, is going to affect the lower vertebrae of the spine. All right. So by having that dialogue, I think is really important. Analyzing video with them is very important. We analyze video so much with our athletes here that at the end of a practice, I can give them that video. They can go in and they can look at it and go, I'm slumping at the finish, or I'm falling onto my knees at the catch. I'm opening too soon, and it's just an educational process that you want to bring the athletes to make them better at what they're doing and minimizing the damage. They have to understand that when they're damaged, they're losing training time. When they're losing training time, they're losing the ability to get faster.
I think most athletes would empathise with that. I've never met one who enjoyed being injured.
Yeah.
Now, Jim, the US is different in one major respect from virtually every other rowing country, where people often have school rowing programs, high school programs, then university programs, and then seniors and masters. But the US is different. Your collegiate rowing program has no sculling events at all. It's only sweep. Tell us, how do you plan to disrupt US collegiate rowing?
The growth of U.S. rowing, of collegiate rowing, has changed tremendously in the past 20 years. Since the onset of Title IX and gender equity, a sport had to be brought into the universities in the United States to help balance off men's football. There's men's baseball, there's women's baseball, there's men's track, there's women's track, there's men's field hockey, there's women's field hockey, there's men's football, and there's nothing on the women's side. So rowing was the sport brought in to do that, and the history of rowing, goes back here at UMass to the 1850s, 1860s. One of our more famous races was in 1871. In 1871, the major boat race between the University of Massachusetts, Harvard, and Brown was a staggered 6-oared shell. Over time, it evolved to an 8-oared shell, and your collegiate athletes in the United States, proceeded then for the next 100 years just to row an 8. So when I started rowing in college, all you really rowed in was the 8. Once in a while that there was a 4. So it only made sense that when the NCAA initiated women's rowing as a collegiate sport, that they would focus on the 8s and the 4s. In 20 years ago, then there were combined, I believe, 47 Division 1, 2, and 3 rowing teams in the United States. So following that historical path of just rowing 8s and 4s seems to be right at that point. So in 2015 now, moving forward 20 years, we have 81 Division 1 programs, 16 Division 2 programs, and 40 Division 3 programs for a total of 144 programs. So now the sport has expanded through all of these colleges, and we have a championship that's set up for 2 8s and a 4. And on the Division 1 side, you have a total of 22 teams out of a maximum 66 teams that go up to an NCAA championship. But in the progress that we've made in building that regatta as a team regatta, all right, we've really diluted the essence of the regatta in that the quality of athlete in the regatta today is less than it was when we started. And I say that because by the time you get down to your second varsity 8 or your varsity 4, are those athletes as good as the top 8 or the top 4 out of another program? Right? So in changing it then over time, what the hope is that the other 66 programs out there that don't have women getting to the NCAA championship, but in reality, some of those women that have never made it to the NCAA championship are sitting in U.S. elite women's crews racing at the World Championships and Olympics. All right, those coaches are going to start to say, okay, something's wrong with this setup. All right, and what's wrong with the setup is rowing is the only Olympic sport sponsored by the NCAA that doesn't follow the Olympic format. If you look at track and field, if you look at swimming, if you look at gymnastics, those are all team events. They all have all of the team events that are sponsored at the Olympics. They're not picking and choosing. So now with the growth of the sport on the collegiate end in the United States, it's added to the creation of all these junior programs in the United States that have a very vibrant championship. And the junior rowing in the United States has figured it out. There are some clubs that are specifying sculling, and there are other clubs that are specifying just 8s. And you go to a championship where you have all the Olympic events highly contested on a high school level. Now, those high school kids, they graduate and they go off to college. And in most of the colleges and universities, for 4 years, they don't have the opportunity to sit in a sculling boat or race a pair or a quad, you know. And so over time, I feel, Rebecca, the coaches are going to look around and say, I've got great athletes here. How come they're not able to get to the NCAA championship? You're going to have juniors that are coming up that are making junior and world teams, and they're going off to college, and they're going to start saying, why can't I race my single? Why can't I race in my women's lightweight double? All right. So over time, I think things are going to start to progress and move in that direction. We've already started an unofficial collegiate championship in the fall for just small boats. It ran the past 2 years for just singles, doubles, and pairs. I think that was received tremendously in the very first year, and it created the interest of more of the women out there. And after all, most colleges, most coaches really should be looking to create more opportunity for their athletes. There's more opportunity, and when you look at the number of different events that we can be participating in compared to just rowing in 8s.
That is a very, very interesting proposition, all told, particularly your comparison with other sports. So where is your unofficial championships for the fall event held?
We had the one championship, it was actually October 2 years ago, and that was in Mercer County, New Jersey. And that was kind of helped along by the U.S. Rowing Association, you know, trying to promote a little bit more collegiate sculling in the country. Last year, unfortunately, the scheduled date was, we had pretty much a hurricane coming through the East Coast here, and we had to cancel it. So that was a little bit disappointing, but we'll be right at it again next year. We think after the first year, we had such interest that we're going to have to look for some satellite regattas around that, all right? And in order to make these changes, the changes have to be made through the NCAA. Now, a lot of people will come out and they'll say, well, how are you going to change the NCAA? It's this giant machine, you know, in Indianapolis. But in effect, the NCAA is simply an association of coaches. The coaches can make any changes that they want as long as they stay within the parameters of number of athletes at the NCAA championship and cost, it's quite feasible to change events. Right now, you can take the second varsity 8 and turn it into a single, a double, and a quad, or a single, a pair, and a quad, and you still have the same amount of athletes going to the championship. In my mind, it would be more representative of a true championship if we did it that way.
So you're advocating a full Olympic program?
I would like to see a full Olympic program, yes.
And at the moment, your fall event was just for women's rowing, is that right?
That was just for women's rowing, right. That would be the other nice thing to see to improve U.S. collegiate rowing. I mean, all of our programs have men's programs. Due to Title IX, again, some of them are classified as club programs, and some of them are classified as varsity programs. I mean, today, listed as far as varsity programs in the country, there are 28 men's Division I programs, 3 Division II programs, and 27 Division III programs. That is not highly representative of all of the number of teams out there. I think it's more in line with the number of Division I women's programs out there, because pretty much every one of those Division women's programs have a men's program that's considered a club program within the university as well. Trying to have championships where both men and women compete at the same time, I think, would actually create a better championship.
Brilliant. So what you're broadly saying is, logistically it's possible. There needs to be a willingness amongst coaches to get together and corporately approach the NCAA to start the dialogue.
Exactly. That's what needs to happen. The coaches themselves have to get together and say, is our rowing programs what we really want them to be? Will we be able to sustain the growth that we have following the current course, or will we need to change our format to enfranchise more people to become varsity programs? Right now, from an economical standpoint, you're looking at teams that are basically supported by the universities, and the better teams are the ones that have the better football teams that are making a lot of money that can help support the system. But at some point, athletic directors are going to look at this and say, okay, if I want to bring in a women's rowing team, I'm going to have to invest in 20 scholarships, and what's that going to cost me, and more boats and whatever, and I'm going to have to carry a roster of X amount of athletes, all right? If we were brought down to the Olympic sport that we truly are, and schools had the opportunity to be varsity programs, but only wanted to have smaller programs, which might focus just on sculling or small boats or whatever, knowing that those athletes would have the opportunity to get to the NCAA championship, then would be attractive to an athletic director.
Absolutely.
What's attractive to an athletic director is the tremendous cost involved with trying to put on a major program that is only going to yield results of his team getting to the NCAA championships once in a while, rather than being able to be a repeater. Just like in track and field, some programs, focus on the sprinters, and some programs focus on the pole vaulters, and some programs focus on the milers. If rowing was more inclusive and didn't have to be this giant thing where you needed mass people and mass scholarships in order to be successful, you might see more programs getting the nod to become varsity programs and able to compete then in smaller boats.
That's brilliant. So let me follow that with a question from Ned from Petaluma at North Bay Rowing Club, and he asks, is it advantageous for sweep rowers to become proficient in sculling? If so, can you explain?
Oh, I think it's totally advantageous for a sweep rower to scull. When you're in a single, there is immediate positive and negative reinforcement as to whether you're doing it right or doing it wrong. When you're sitting in an 8 and all you've learned is to sit in there with 8 other people, you really can't feel how your energy is being generated and the velocity that you're trying to create. Put that person in a single, and it's like Goldilocks walking into the Three Little Bears house, you know? It's like one bed's too hard, one bed's too soft, and one bed's just right, okay? You put a person in a single and they pull too hard and they rip the water, they didn't go anywhere. On the contrary, they don't push hard enough, they don't go anywhere. You push just right, you find your acceleration, you find your speed. You know, I think that technical part of sculling is really important, as well as personal accountability of the athlete and the boat. Here at UMass, you know, generally our top 8 is our top 8 single scullers. I mean, we race out all the time to find out who can move a boat, and it's not always the biggest person in your group of athletes that is the boat mover. It's the crafty ones that know how to pick a boat up and accelerate it, you know, and that makes for excitement. It makes for accountability, and I'll tell you, the women here are very enthusiastic and competitive when it comes to their sculling. They don't shy away from it.
That's really interesting. So do you do weight limited erg tests and things, or weight adjusted erg tests?
We do the weight adjusted erg test. You know, we look at that. We factor it out on the simple concept 2 thing there, and look for a value of around 15 for our gals. And you know, my 8s kind of look like bookends, where my stern pair, my bow pair might be, you know, 4, the smallest person in the boathouse, and my engine room's got some mass to it, you know, so it all works out, it all sorts itself out. And, you know, a lot of times exactly what you're seeing on the erg with the numbers is what you're going to see in the boat. All right, and when you have that weight adjusted value in there, I find it to be quite accurate.
That's really interesting. I come from a club in London called Tideway Scullers, where they have a tradition of selecting 8s pretty much as you described. If you can build respect by beating people in a single, then, you know, you're looking at a good seat in the 8 when it comes through to that time of year.
Well, Rebecca, one thing that I love, and the Tideway Scullers coach, I think, was the one that initiated that, was the Scullers World Championship 8 that has been coming to the United States to race in the head of the Charles the past few years.
Bill
and I'll tell
Barry.
you, that's one great blow for sculling, because both the men's 8 and the women's 8 at this past year's regatta, you know, won, and the Scullers beat the international sweep boat as well. So, all for sculling.
Absolutely. Let's hear it for the Scullers. So, moving to the next question. Nelson from Green Bay, Wisconsin at La Baie Verte Rowing Club asks, what standard warm-up drills do you have your crews do on the water?
Well, I have to say no 2 days look alike, because I don't want any warm-up to be repeated day after day to, you know, so the athlete stops thinking about it. Constantly I'm changing the warm-ups from day to day. Whether they're in the sweep boats or whether I have 12 singles out next to each other, we're doing, you know, the basic drills, starting off on a straight pick, going to a swing pick, you know, going to quarter slide, you know, working it around. Sometimes we'll start the workouts off on front end drills and, you know, do that type of thing. I like to throw a lot of pausing into my routines as far as training my athletes. You know, pausing at body prep, pausing at the finish, pausing at hands away. All those things I find can contribute to establishing rhythm, and establishing rhythm in the sequential manner that I want my athletes to generate that force and create that velocity. You know, so on any particular day we're changing, even to the point where we play a little game where the coxswains will play Simon Says with the athlete, you know, making them pause or whatever at you know, a split second at any particular point in the stroke cycle, so they're in control of their slide. all of my drills, have that posture in mind, and just trying to tie the athletes together, looking at the posture. But you can look at a dozen different drawing books, and they're all going to have drills, and they're all going to be fine drills. So I wouldn't say I want to focus on any particular thing. I like to move it around and change my drills constantly for the athletes.
How does Simon Says work? I mean, I know the children's game.
How does it work? Basically, if you're pausing, at the finish, every third stroke the coxswain will go, pause in the finish now, and they'll stop at the finish, or pause the 3/4 slide, they'll pause the 3/4 slide, or pause hands away, they'll pause hands away. It's just to keep them focused. You don't want to get into what I call the mindlessness of sweep rowing, where everybody's just following everybody and nobody's really paying attention to what's going on. You want to be aware of where you are in the boat at all times, and you want to be able to try to tie your athletes together. And that's how we do it through that Simon Says. I'll have to send you a video clip.
I'd love it. I will share it on the Row Perfect blog to anyone who wants it. Now, how can regatta organisers help your drive towards sculling in the collegiate programs?
Some of the regatta organizers are already starting to do it. The ACRA Championships, which are the U.S. Collegiate Club Championships, not the varsity team, the club teams, they are putting in pretty much all of the Olympic events. They have singles, doubles, and pairs, I know now. I'm not sure if they have quads. The Dad Vale Regatta in Philadelphia, which is one of the biggest collegiate rowing events in the country. The past 2 years, they've added the women and men's single and women and men's pair, and that I think is just great. And again, it's changing the mold of what we want to see. Just have to take more time to get into more regattas and get more collegiate coaches involved in coaching small boats. It's very easy for any program to go out there and say, okay, one coach can get out there and jump in his launch and go out with 2 or 3/8 and get everything done. All right. And that's easy. It's a little bit more difficult to take, 16 singles and, 4 or 5 pairs out and do the same workout. But it is possible to do it. They just have to learn how to do it. We talk about the economy of the rowing stroke, but there's also the economy of the methodology in coaching, and I think these are just, things that coaches are going to have to learn. I think most of the coaches that are involved in small boats are coaches like myself that came through small club programs where they had a lot of small boat rowing. Yeah. And now with the growth of juniors rowing in the United States, and those kids coming up and going to college, and then they're going to graduate from college, and they're going to be looking for something to do. Hopefully they'll get into coaching and they'll bring those skills along with them. But it's an educational process. It can be done, and it can be done safely.
Could the college recruiting system also be improved? You're taking a broad sweep at the whole system. So is that inviolate?
I think the recruiting part of rowing is fine. The coaches that have the scholarships, to go out and recruit are doing a fine job. And, partially it's a fine job because the junior rowing in the United States is so organized. You can go to a half a dozen really good junior events leading up to the junior nationals in the United States and see some top class athletes, And the interesting thing here, Rebecca, is that a lot of the top athletes that are being recognized are those top athletes that are sitting in singles and doubles and pairs, because, they come right to the forefront that, wow, look what this kid, can do in a single. Look at the numbers this kid is pulling on a nerd, yet they bring him into college and they just put him in sweep boats. It's like there's where we lose the skill factor for 4 years, and draw our kids away from Olympic events rather than pushing them towards Olympic events.
And of course, you see that overseas when people go race at Canadian Henley and at British Henley. The American universities often have very few native-born Americans in their top crews.
Yep, that's true. Yep, you're seeing that a lot, both on the women's side of rowing here in the United States and the men's side of rowing. They're finding better athletes abroad. The United States is a melting pot right now, and I'd say we're probably training 70% of the world's elite rowers here in the United States right now, simply because of the resources that we have. Yet the United States remains a nation of 8. You aren't really seeing the success of our athletes in the lower boat classes and the singles, doubles, and pairs.
So how could the changes that you're advocating feed through to US world rowing results?
Oh, I think it's a growing process. In the United States, the mentality is you're successful right away or you go out and find something else. All right. I was brought up more in a European mentality in my club, where right from the onset the coaches are sitting you down and saying, if you want to be good at this, it's going to take 7 to 10 years. And that's the process of developing a top-notch international racer. It's not somebody who is just naturally gifted and you hop in a boat. There's a lot that comes in that development, both from a physiological and a psychological standpoint. All right, taking that slower approach, bringing an athlete up gradually, and this is our level here, and then we're going to move to the next level, and by 3 years into it, we're moving into this range of our racing and our development. Constantly being in a particular boat class where you understand that boat class as an athlete, what it's supposed to feel like when you're in a single versus a quad, or a pair versus an 8. All right, those are all skill things that, if you're allowed to remain in those boats, you're going to get more proficient at those boats. And from the coaching end of it, there are coaches that are going to understand those boat speeds because they've worked with those boat speeds and those boat classes for a longer period of time.
So it benefits both the coaching and the athlete side. And of course, it would be nice to see the US putting more crews into world finals. You're a very, very big nation, and you're unfairly underrepresented by comparison with some smaller nations.
Absolutely, and that's where things have to change. We've got to be successful in all the boat classes, and U.S. Rowing realizes that. U.S. Rowing is trying to move in that direction with our coaching education and trying to build a base. There are 14 Olympic events. We should be putting a boat in the final of every one of those events. With the number of athletes that we have in this country and the feeder system we have in this country, we should be able to make a final in every Olympic boat class for both men and for women. What it's going to take is getting those athletes into those different boat classes and racing them longer over a more sustained period of time.
Absolutely right. Now we're going to take a short break with a message from our sponsor. Have you ever felt lonely or uncertain about your rowing journey? Have you ever wondered why things aren't working out the way you want? One way out of a bad place is to get advice from somebody whose expertise can give you answers to your questions and a pathway to a better place. Row Perfect rowing coaches and experts in nutrition and physiology are on hand to help you. Ever wondered if you'd go faster with advice from an Olympic coach? Or need an external helping hand with your own coaching? For example, how to teach quick catches or improve power. Row Perfect rowing coaches help you, the coach, as well as athletes. Coaching the coach is a major education need because coaching is lonely, unsupervised, and often unsupported. Row Perfect helps you with its rowing coach and remote coaching advisory service. For just £10, you can buy advice and guidance, bringing support and answers to your questions. It's easy to buy. Go to rowperfect.co.uk/remote-coaching and have a look at the Rowing Coach remote coaching service and see the list of experts available to you. There's a 100% refund if you're not fully satisfied with any of the advice you buy. Now, back in conversation with Jim Dietz. Jim, we've got a few technical questions coming through here. The first one is from Barbara, who's in Folsom, California, and rowing with the SAC Masters. She asks, I've got 3 years of rowing experience and I open up too soon on the drive and I have trouble feeling when I'm doing this. Any tips?
A lot of different ways that you can solve that problem. If you are on an erg, you could actually have somebody hold the handle as you're trying to drive and think that you want to be driving just legs only. Basically the simple rowing, starting off on the erg or in the boat rowing legs only and feeling where that energy is moving into the body is very important. How you're hanging is, with your arms and wrists and everything relaxed on the oar will help you with that. But just to feel more force on the load. The problem is today our boats are lighter than they've ever been, and people are losing the pulling motion because everything is just too quick. Slow the erg down to do it, or if you're in the boat, you could tie your single up with a rope or a bungee, so you're creating a lot of drag on the boat, and just put your focus on your legs and think that you're like an Irish dancer and nothing happens from the waist on up. You're just hanging on the oar, pressing the legs and just finding that hang.
Well, that's great, Barbara. I hope that gives you a couple of really good things to practice. Now, Sean in Portland, Oregon asks, what's the most effective training approach for a masters rower trying to improve their 2K erg time?
Well, Sean, I'd have to say you want to spend a lot of time on the erg. But even in doing that, you need to cover all the zones as you're training. You can go to any rowing information webpage or whatever and find out the different types of workouts that you can do. But you want to get a good amount of long, slow distance, but then you have to hit some aerobic, some anaerobic type of work, and just have a blend of what you need to do in order to get faster. Dealing with younger athletes, a lot of times if you want them to go faster, you get them to do less because a lot of the kids are overtraining. I think just having a proper blend of the different, the 3 major zones that you want to hit, and work at it 5 to 6 days a week will improve your erg score.
That sounds like a great start, Jim, and best of luck, Sean, in your 2K test. Now, Colleen from Jamestown in New York at the Chattooga Lake Rowing Association asks, what's your best tip for a new novice coach?
I think the novice coaches are the most important people out there because, that's the onset of the whole education process. And for the novice coach, I think patience is the greatest virtue, all right? You don't want to be thinking that, I'm starting these kids off and in 2 months, 3 months, we've got a race, all right? You want to think of the long-term picture. How am I going to create an athlete, all right? And to the novice coach, spending that extra time on the erg and in the boat, focusing on technique, focusing on posture, focusing on application of power, all right? Let them get there. If they have so much time to spend with you, make that time the technical time where you're going to be training them so they're not going to be getting injured. If you want to get them in shape, let them do their running and their other stuff on their own. But as far as the coach goes, really take your time, focus on technique, focus on posture, have a mental picture of what you want that athlete to look like, and don't be satisfied until you get there. Don't be concerned with numbers and don't be concerned with racing. Teach the person how to row and let the athlete develop later.
Do you advocate doing a lot of rowing in sixes so that the boat is held stable?
Not only for novices, but right on down to your varsity programs. I want to look at myself as a coach, as somebody who's choreographing a dance, all right? And I can only choreograph that dance if I have a stable platform in order to do it. If I patiently work if I'm coaching an 8 and I'm taking time to work by pairs, then to 4s, then to 6s, and I'm analyzing their hand level, their body angle, their leg drive, all right? And I have this repetition over and over and over again. Neurologically, I'm creating a habit, all right? To the point where when you do go all 8, you have perfect balance and you've done your job, and the athletes will be able to perform well through the rowing stroke. If not, what happens is athletes learn to row defensively, compensating for people in the boat that are not doing the right thing. And we all know what it's like to sit in a boat that's flopping around like a dead fish, on a dock.
Absolutely. So Elizabeth from Rochester in New York at Rochester Boat Club asks, how do you describe the feel of the recovery to your rowers?
I describe it more or less as chasing your hands. Again, sequentially, if you're rowing correctly, the handle through the drive, from the drive through into the body, the handle is accelerating around. At the finish, the handle accelerates right around through its natural speed. The energy coming in is the energy turning around, going around. So the feeling is more that you're chasing your hands. Your hands are leading everything else out. Another analogy that I use is, you're walking up a balance beam. All right. So on that recovery, as you're chasing your hands out, you want to be extremely patient, so there's no rush going into the front stops.
And following from that, Morena Calvajo has asked, what's your take on how fast the hands should go out from the release at the finish?
The energy in is the energy out. So basically, you're just rebounding that energy out of the bow. So the speed of your hand into the body and away from the body is different based on if you're rowing 18 strokes a minute, 24 strokes a minute, 34 strokes a minute, all right? It's the acceleration of the handle in is the acceleration of the handle out. So when I see people and coaches often make the mistake telling people to get their hands out fast. What they should be telling them is to accelerate the handle into the body and turn it away. All right, just by throwing the hands out fast isn't accomplishing your boat speed. It's not creating any rebound effect out of bow. So that language that you're using in your analysis to your athlete has to be specific so they understand that speed, that change in speed of the hands at the different stroke intensities and different stroke ratings.
Now moving on to Ali, who's in Princeton and rows for the CLRA. She asks, why do you like head races more than sprint races? Do you?
I enjoy head racing more now as a master than I did, than I do sprint racing. For masters, I think 1,000 meters is just too quick of a sprint. I like the longer races. 2,000 meters is a good distance. I love 2,000 meter racing, but for masters going 1,000 meters, I think masters would be better served to row longer distances than shorter distances. That's why I prefer the head racing. I like the 5K races. Gives you plenty of time to think about what you need to do, and You know, the type of work that you're doing as a master over a 5K course is what you want to be doing for your health, and that's, you know, building your aerobic system, building your heart, you know. And I just love head racing.
Do you also like the fact that there's a lot more gamesmanship in there? There's steering, there's a lot more opportunity to use your experience and expertise to plan and execute a really good race, whereas in a straight lane 2K course, you're usually only responding to what other people do.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I mean, you know, racing in the head of the Charles of the past 50 years, one thing you learn is when to move, when not to move, you know, where to take the inside corner. If you've got a good sculler coming up on you, how to put your puddle right on their bow so it feels like they have a flat tire. You know, there's a lot more fun involved.
I'm glad I never got to race you. Now, I have a question here, which I want to ask, which is, what should an ambitious college rower do to get into the US national team?
You know, I think there are only 10 seats on that Olympic team for sweep rowers. And, you know, if you're a good collegiate athlete, you need to be getting it out. If your college doesn't offer you the opportunity to scull, you need to take the time to join the different clubs around the country that focus on sculling, because there are just as many sculling seats at the Olympics as there are sweep for women and for men, you know, and, you know, that's where the United States needs the most help. You know, we're plenty good when it comes to the big boat, but when it comes to the smaller boats, that takes skill, and the only way to get that skill is to get into those boats. So I would encourage those college kids to get into a good club program during the summer and really just enhance their sculling, and they'll have a lot more fun doing it.
Fantastic. You've mentioned obviously that you're still racing, and George Petlin from Australia has asked, how does your training change in consideration of age and racing distance?
I like to row most of the time by myself, and I stop frequently to watch the birds, and but it's not as regimented as it was when I was younger. I do take full advantage of the opportunity to go out and scull with the athletes here at UMass. I'll go out and scull with my women on a daily basis. For me, it's mostly long, slow distance. I very rarely do anything ballistic, you know, as I did when I was training. You know, so I guess it's more geared towards that long, slow distance, and, you know, putting in lots of miles, because I enjoy being out there for lots and lots of miles.
And you don't try and coach when you're doing those outings with them?
No, I don't really coach much from the boat. I'll just row next to them. They listen to me enough, and usually I'm out of breath, so, you know.
That's very honest. George also wants to know whether your philosophy has changed since your days of elite sculling.
I don't think it's really changed much at all. You know, from a very early age, I viewed myself as somebody that had the potential to go to the Olympics and do great things. And that, I think, is something that I try to instill in the younger people that I have work with here. You know, that a lot of these people just don't view themselves as somebody that, you know, could make it to that national team or make it to that Olympic Games. And a lot of them do have the potential to do that. They just have to make a conscious decision that, you know, they need to get on that road and have it happen. You know, rowing, to answer, you know, George's question, rowing has always been a fun thing for me. It's always lit up my life. It lights up my life as much today working with younger people as it did when I was competing myself.
Tell us an anecdote about some of the enjoyment and pleasure you get from working with these young people.
You know, it's tremendous. I mean, you know, you see it at every level, how empowered people can be, by rowing. And you might get just as much enjoyment from that Judy bag of donuts or Joe bag of donuts that can't chew gum and walk at the same time and is got, 6 feet when it comes to walking, but you get them in the boat and you teach them something and all of a sudden they get empowered and it gets better and better and better. So seeing growth on every level, I think, is very rewarding from a psychological standpoint, to see how strong people come because of the sport. There's just something about the sport that over time makes people extremely strong mentally and able to handle anything that comes their way in life. So it's all just great life lessons,
I totally support that. Now, Lubo, your old friend from Toronto at Argonaut Rowing Club, wants to know, are you ready to come down to Pensacola, Florida for some coastal rowing?
You can tell Lubo that I've already bought my coastal rowing boat, and he is going to see me out there, very shortly. I'm very excited about it. I think the definition of what we think of rowing to be in the United States is way too narrow. We need to broaden it out more like the Europeans. I know the International Federation FISA is going great guns into coastal rowing. The United States Rowing Association is also on a path now to move into coastal rowing. Rowing can be broadened out. There's a lot more to rowing than, just the skinny boats and the 2,000 meter courses. I think it's going to be great for masters right down to juniors. And I'm excited about it. I can't wait. I love going out in rough water.
One of the things I learned when I was taken out by the gentleman from Sausalito, the open water sculling club in San Francisco, I learned how to let the water do what it wanted to do under the boat. And that was a real gift when I then got back into a fine boat.
Mm-hmm. You can't fight Mother Nature. You got to learn to work with it.
That's right. And sore forearms are really painful. Now, Jim, you're a vice president of the US Rowing Board of Directors. You've mentioned briefly one of the focuses about broadening the base of rowing. You've also mentioned to me that you're focusing on new venues to race 2,000 meters in the US. Can you tell the listeners more about that?
Rowing has grown exponentially over the past 20 years. I mean, there are more rowing programs in the United States than you can shake a stick at right now. The traditional courses here in the Northeast, close to us here at the University of Massachusetts, racing in Boston, racing in Worcester, where they've been racing since the 1800s. Those courses on any weekend through the spring season are running races from 7 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. All right. There aren't enough venues in the United States for all the rowing that we have right now. One of the drawbacks to all the different Olympics that we've had here in the United States is we really haven't had that legacy after an Olympics of an Olympic style course like in Pendrith or in Eton, where it's spectator friendly and a perfect 2,000 meter swimming pool. We're looking to create more venues on more lakes and stuff, but we're also looking to try to get that special course in the United States, that international FISA Class A type course being built. All right, we do have one going down in Saratoga, Florida, which will host the 2017 World Championships. There's another course in Oklahoma, which has just been made, which is also fabulous. But to create more rowing courses on the East Coast and the West Coast is really in our focus in U.S. rowing right now to add to our growth. We need venues, we need spectator venues that are friendly to are fair to the athletes and friendly to the spectators that are going to be coming to them. So that's our goal right now.
That would be wonderful if you could get one in every state. Would be a really great start, and 15 in every state on the east and west coast. Tell us about the Olympic bid. Boston wants to host the Olympic Games.
Boston wants to host the Olympic Games. Actually, we're trying to work with the Boston 2024 committee. As with any Olympic bid, there is a separate organization dealing with that. The host city, Boston, won that bid. The bid package, then, looking at all of the different sports and all of the different venues, is basically thrown out there without much research until the USOC gives the city in the United States bidding the designation that you will be our Olympic bid city. So here, Boston has received that bid over Washington and San Francisco and a few of the others. Now it gets a lot more serious. Dealing with the bid committee in Boston, we're looking at various sites around the state. Again, they designated Lowell, Massachusetts as a potential site. They had thought that they could do it on the basin in Boston, which is a traditional race course, but most of these places aren't going to fit the FISA international qualifications for a Class A course. What we'd like to do is try to find a spot where we could create a course as they did in Eaton for 2012. The beauty of that course, seating capacity of 40,000 and standing room for 10,000. And I remember watching the games on TV when all the talking sports heads were saying a lot of the venues weren't filled. The rowing venue was filled there. And
absolutely,
we'd like to see that excitement come to the United States, because with the growth of our sport, I think we might be able to fill that stadium of 50,000 people. And that would be fabulous to have that kind of a legacy here in Massachusetts someplace.
That would be marvellous. I totally support your point of view. One of the things that I've always admired in how the British have delivered the World Championships and World Cup regattas is they bring a crowd in. Every time they do it, they have tailbacks on the highways because they have got an enthusiastic bunch of people who really, really want to be there and want to watch. And it breaks my heart to see a World Championships with empty seats, because I know there are so many people who would love to be there. And I kind of, as a British person, of course, feel that maybe they should be awarded it more often because they can draw the crowd.
Well, the British are a knowledgeable spectator group. I mean, it's been going on there for a long time, but I think the enthusiasm in the United States and the growth of our sport here, I think we could duplicate their enthusiasm in a venue here.
Well, that's a challenge, and I'm sure it's one that everyone will enjoy seeing the outcome. Jim, thank you so much for your time. Can you let the listeners know where they can connect with you online?
Online, it's JDIETZ at admin.umass.edu.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for your time and energy. This month, everybody who is subscribed to the Row Perfect UK newsletter is entered into a prize draw. It happens every month. And this month, our free prize draw winner is going to win a special sweatshirt donated by Jim from his University of Massachusetts crew. We welcome comments and suggestions for new episodes of Rowing Chat, or if you've got further questions from this episode, please do so to info@rowperfect.co.uk. Past episodes are available at rowperfect.co.uk/rowing chat. You can follow us on Twitter @rowperfect or on Facebook, Row Perfect UK. Or subscribe to our feed in iTunes, SoundCloud or YouTube. Just search for Rowing Chat. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share this with your clubmates, which will help other rowers get more enjoyment from their rowing. For more information about Row Perfect UK and its educational services for coaches, coxswains and athletes, go to rowperfect.co.uk.